Welcome to the Creative Warriors podcast, the heart and soul of photography. I'm Ariel, Faith, your host. Welcome to the Creative Warrior podcast. We are speaking with Janioris, and I probably didn't do that great, but so pronounce your name the correct pronunciation.
No, you got it. You did so good. So Janioris, Janioris.
Okay. And you have a special niche and one that I really am going to find interesting talking to you about. So do me a favor and just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your photographic journey and where you are like right now in your, what genres you are, is your heart photography, etc.
Sure. Well, we won't talk about how long ago this was. I won't date myself too much, but ever since high school, I've been doing photography ever since the age-old days of darkrooms, if that gives you any indication, right? So I started in the darkroom back in high school. And ever since high school, I've been doing all kinds of, like photo shoots for my own friends, for my girlfriends and everything in high school. And just have done photography ever since. But my business is now probably about 6 years old at this point. And I have photographed, just like many photographers have basically photographed everything under the sun. started out with flowers and then, like you're saying, get to a place where you find your heart photography, which I love that term that you use. And so probably the only thing I haven't tried is babies. I even hired for my own babies photography because I know better. It's a different skill set, I think. So I pretty much tried everything except, babies. And then I was getting married and I was trying to find a boudoir photographer for myself. And I found it really difficult to find a photographer that I loved their style, their photographic style, but also loved their rhetoric, their messaging, and like what they stood for as people. And I think when you're doing a photography specifically like boudoir, but also other things like maybe even your wedding or things like this, you really want to be able to resonate and connect with the photographer that you're doing that with. It's a very vulnerable experience. And you're really, technically really exposing yourself, but not just physically, also just emotionally and mentally to this person. And I found it really difficult to find a photographer that I loved their style, but I also resonated with them as a person. And I looked everywhere. I mean, I looked beyond my state and everything. It's not like I was looking only for a local photographer, but I found that really difficult. It seemed like, and that's not necessarily the case anymore, but when I was looking, it seemed like the messaging was very pro-femininity, but at the cost of masculinity. It felt like there was a lot of like support for women to be empowered, but there was a lot of belittling and emasculating and a lot of like just messaging I couldn't agree with when it came to speaking about men in order to empower women. And I just believed that you could be an empowered woman without having anything to do with the men in your life at all. And that there was no need to sort of put down our men in order to bring up our women. Absolutely. And so that was my difficulty. I just found it really hard to find a photographer that I love their style, but I also loved their messaging. So I kind of stepped into that gap that I saw. And I think many of us are like this, where we kind of become what we needed, or we find that there was an empty space in the market that we can fill. And so I kind of took my experience and my expertise and all the photo shoots I had ever done of my girlfriends and everything and all the stuff I had created, and just my passion for making women feel beautiful and feel, powerful, and all of these things that I'm able to do through boudoir, and then also add messaging that was not deteriorating the strength of marriages or relationships while doing so. So that's basically how I got here. And that's why I'm focused specifically on the woman's journey. I do, motherhood photography and maternity and all kinds of things that have to do with a woman's journey. I've done branding and things for like women who are CEOs and business owners, and basically anything that involves that woman's journey. But my true, like you say, heart photography is boudoir and really walking women through an intimate feminine portraiture experience.
Okay, now do me a favor, because I know in this particular industry there's confusion about what boudoir really is. And I remember hearing you speak at an online conference, and you had a really good explanation of what boudoir photography was, because I think a lot of us that aren't educated have a different opinion, kind of like a negative one that, gets a little kinky. So sorry for the word, but you know what I mean? We have like a perception that's not correct. So from your perspective, explain to the audience what boudoir photography is for you.
I'm so glad you asked that, because it is true that, especially now as this genre has become more popular, it has expanded into both spectrums, right? So you have everywhere from, girls in sweaters and really girly, fun, kind of feminine photography, all the way to the more explicit photography. And so you have a large gamut of what that might consist of. For me, so basically for anyone listening who hasn't heard this term or may not know where it comes from, so boudoir in itself, that word is a French word that means bedroom, right? So it's your intimate space, or that room or that space where you would get dressed, get ready, and have that space for yourself. So that's where that initially comes from. For me specifically and my brand, it is sexy, it is intimate, it is sensual, but it's also tasteful and classy. And in my business, there's no explicit content. And there are photographers out there who call themselves boudoir photographers, but are really leaning more towards erotica. And that's an important distinction of erotica versus boudoir. So anything that restricts movement, anything that is exposing sensitive areas of the body and those type of things, or anything that shows or even implicitly or implies sexual activity or anything like that, is not boudoir. That is erotica, and it's a different genre. But it is true that there are photographers that do that but call themselves boudoir, and that's where that confusion comes in. So for me, it's very classy and it's very intimate. And actually, part of why my niche is so specific is because I also primarily cater to a conservative wife. So my audience specifically, obviously all photographers who are listening, you know that you create an audience that you're speaking to. For many, that avatar or whatever it is that might be called these days, your ideal client or any of those things, right? So for me, I'm specifically, my messaging caters to a conservative wife. And this is specifically surrounding the taboo topics and the issues in the Christian community, specifically women of faith in the Christian faith, that struggle with understanding their bodies, understanding what is allowable within their values and their morals, and how to really explore aspects of their intimacy and improve their body and bedroom confidence without compromising their values. And that's my niche inside the niche, right? So,
yes, definitely.
So I'm glad that you have this distinction. So yes, it's the whole gamut, but for me, and just understandably in the community, which is relatively small, the boudoir community, it is understood that anything that is implied sexual activity or exposed sensitive body parts or restriction of movement or any of that is, like you're saying, could be considered kink or fetish or erotica and not boudoir.
Okay. I'm glad you clarified that, because I think there's a lot of misconception that they're the same. Mm-hmm. And I know when you spoke, that was interesting to me because that was what my impression was. And when you spoke at that conference, I was like, oh, there's a total difference. Now, I know your work involves a lot of almost psychology, because you have to really help, or part of what you love is helping the women feel confident, right? Mm-hmm, Same with me, but in a different aspect.
Right.
So explain a little bit about how, just, shortly, how do you help a woman? What's your process in helping somebody become more confident? Like what kind of a conversation do you have before you get in front of the camera?
It's such a difficult journey to bring a woman into a place where she might say, yeah, I'm confident now, right? It's not really a switch that you don't flip a switch and now you're a confident person. In fact, even the women who would consider themselves confident, I consider myself a confident woman, but I don't have not all of my moments are not confident moments, if that makes sense. Not all of my life
100%.
experiences feel confident all the time. But I might have a propensity to more confidence in situations that are outside of my comfort zone, or maybe I've learned techniques that help me be more confident in moments where I'm most uncomfortable, right? But I don't know that it's ever a switch that you flip and you're now confident forevermore, right? But when it comes to this and body and bedroom confidence specifically and how my work helps that, I think that it starts with the content that I provide constantly. So I'm constantly trying to help women reconcile with their bodies. I think a lot of our lack of confidence comes from our insecurities with our bodies. And believe it or not, our insecurities in our bodies actually start in our mind. So then those conversations and that content that we provide, trying to help women navigate some of the inner dialogue that happens in the mind related to their bodies and their concepts of their bodies and how they might offer their bodies as gifts inside of loving covenant relationship, all those conversations and that content starts to put a little seed in the heart of women to build the confidence they need inside the bedroom and everywhere else in their community. I believe that that confidence that you have in your body and in the bedroom, because it's the most vulnerable, most intimate relationship that you have, that has a ripple effect to all the other aspects of you as a woman. It makes you a more confident mother, a more confident business owner, a more confident contributor to your community. Because if you're confident and comfortable within yourself and you're the person that's always with you, then you can carry that confidence into all these different other aspects and ways that you connect with people and communicate with people going onwards. So it starts with the content. I think it continues with the way I manage my business. So because I really capitalize on the privacy aspect, and privacy is so important in my business, specifically catering to my audience who are conservative wives, right? So my business is really quite private, and it has come at the cost of my scalability, but it's really quite important to me, specifically for my audience members. So like my Instagram is a private page, and my Facebook, I don't have a public Boudoir page. I only have a private group. The members are vetted before they're entered in, and they're all women. There's no shared accounts. There's no things like that. On my website, there's no accessible open portfolio of my work, even on the internet. So the way I manage the privacy aspect, I think also gives women the confidence they need to navigate an experience like this, knowing that it won't fall into the wrong hands, that it won't be mishandled, or that it's not being used really for my gain at all. If I was really only thinking of my gain, then I would definitely use my images differently, because then I would be able to grow faster. But to me, it's more important that every woman feels the comfort of the experience they're navigating, and that we have the whole range. Women come through, and some people nobody knows that they came through. There's no behind the scenes photos. There's no hair and makeup photos. There are no photos of anything. It's like it never happened. And then there are other women that give me the freedom and have given me trust to share all kinds of photos from their experience and maybe even some of the product, But there's a whole range. And I think that the way I handle that aspect of my business also gives women the confidence to navigate it comfortably. And then after everything is over, decide how much they want to share, if anything at all. And I think when you don't feel that pressure that you have to share, that you have to expose your life, we live in such a public life these days.
Oh, you're not kidding.
Everything is so available to everyone at any given time. So this gives women, I think, there's no pressure. So you know that you can just genuinely navigate an experience and then decide how much of that you want to share. So I think that helps too. And then the last thing I'll share in terms of walking women through that confidence, something incredible happens when I flip my camera over for the first time. That first image that I let that girl see, that is raw. I haven't edited it. It just happened. I took the photo. I choose one of the best times once they loosen up a little bit, and it's a stunning, phenomenal photo. I turn it around and her face lights up, and I remind her, I haven't done anything to this photo. This is you. This is what you look like. And I think that it's like this out of body experience for you to, for the first time, almost see yourself from that angle and know that whenever you're in a position of that kind of vulnerability in your real life, this is what you actually look like. And we have these imagined stories as women of what we look like and what he's thinking about and whatever's happening.
We should look like.
What we should look like, exactly what is being, all over the media or whatever. And so when you turn that around and that woman has not, like you're saying, not a comparison, not anything else, this is you. Look how stunning you are. I think that something in her clicks, it clicks like, wow, this is me. You haven't done anything. This isn't something that, it's not a Photoshop thing or whatever. I feel beautiful. And when a woman feels that from the inside and then gets to see it from the outside, from someone else's perspective, I think that it really does a number on her going out of there. Women come out. I wish I could have just a camera that sees them coming into the studio versus leaving the studio, and just how that posture changes and how, you just face the world differently, because it almost gives you a mirror to look at that kind of helps you see who you really were on the inside this whole time and how that's shown through. And for me, it might be a crinkle in their nose when they're laughing and they were just laughing at something silly I'm doing. And, you don't see yourself. You don't see yourself when you crinkle and you're laughing, and when your tummy fills up with air because you're laughing, and your tummy is not about abs. It's about what is holding this joy and exuberant laughter. And when you see that, I think it tears down some walls and it helps women to see themselves in a new light. And I just talked forever, but I just think that those are some of the ways that I try to enforce that confidence throughout the experience, before anybody's a client, during, and then throughout that whole experience until the end.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to have one more question for this episode, and then we'll come back again. But I wanted to ask you, because I know I have seen different things, but you being in this particular genre, I would imagine that the critiques and the people, some of the negative responses to those that don't have a vision of what it really is, right? I would imagine that creates some exterior problems and pressures that you've had to deal with. Is there anything in that subject that you would like to share? Something you've overcome, had to fight through?
Wow. I'll tell you, I feel like I'm fighting every day. It feels like I have to fight every day against these things. I think that because of the lack of knowledge and understanding in this area, because of how taboo it is in society to even discuss these matters at all, even though things are getting better in these areas and they're becoming more open in discussion, because of that, I think there's a lot of assumptions made. And a lot of people have made assumptions about me, about my character, about my family, about my relationship, my husband. My parents are pastors. So my parents, our relationship, all kinds of assumptions are made about why I do what I do, what it is that I do, for people who don't actually see it, but they just assume, maybe because of the title or because of whatever they've heard or what have you. So there's a lot of assumptions made. And those I'm not going to lie, there have been moments that have felt very harmful to me, to our family, to the testimony, the witness, the reputation that we've tried to build, my family and I, over all this time. And I think that it goes back to, I know who I am. And if I know who I am, then the assumptions that other people have don't matter as much. And it goes back to that same thing I teach my clients. What happens internally and what happens in your inner dialogue, what happens in your heart, affects and radiates to the outside. You can't work it out in. You have to start in out, right?
Right.
So in the same way, for me, I have to start within myself. It has to be a constant reminder of, why do I do what I do? Does this matter? Is this important? Do I feel like I have God's approval? Because that's what I need, first of all. In my personal life, if I have God's approval, his backing and his support, if my family know who I am, my inner circle understands and knows who I am, my husband and I are clear, and I know I'm doing everything, taking all the steps that I need to within my business to respect my clients and to respect this genre, then I'm good. Whatever assumptions are made, I can move past them because I know they're not founded in truth. It would only affect me if something was being spread that was true, and here I feel caught, right? But if what is being spread, and I've had to address certain rumors, I've had to address certain things, publicly, I've had to edit my circles and the people that surround me. I've had to understand that not everybody is going to grasp what I'm doing. Not everybody, within women of faith, we always say like, when God calls you, it's not a conference call. I've heard people say that, right? It's not a conference call. So like not everybody was there when God gave you a calling or a purpose, and not everybody's going to understand it, right? So like for me, it wasn't a conference call with everybody. Everybody's not going to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. But I do know from being in this community myself, from being the person that I'm serving now, initially being the person that I'm now serving, I know how necessary this is. I know how needed it is for a woman to feel confident and powerful in this area. I know how important it is for women of faith, who are sexy too, by the way, and who have every right to also feel sexy and in touch with their femininity and confidence and sexuality. But I know that lack of intimacy is partly responsible for the dissolution of marriages, even those inside the church. I know how impactful it is for a woman to be standing on her 2 feet solidly in her marriage, and what that does for her intimacy and what that does for herself and the value that she knows she has. And so like if I bring those things to the forefront, I know the value of it. I know who I am, right? We started with that. Yep. I know who called me. I have his support. I know who I am, and everybody who is in my inner circle knows who I am. And I know why I do this, why it's important, what the impact is. I keep in the forefront the experiences that my clients have had, how it has changed them, the ways that they have spoken about how these experiences have had ripple effects on every other area of their life. And I keep those things in the forefront. And as long as those things are still happening, and those core values and core important things are still being supported, are still true, then everything else can toss me back and forth, maybe temporarily. I'm not going to act like it doesn't affect me ever. But then I go back and root myself on the ground that I stand on. And this is why I do it. And it's too important to leave it alone.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, because I know it's not always easy when we have people who are, giving us a hard time for something that really does benefit the rest of humanity, really. But it's been misused by so many that misuse or that abuse of it has caused problems for the purity that you're trying to share with the universe. And that's really beautiful. So in this episode, we're going to come back again, and we're going to talk about a little bit about visual elements and expression in your work and how you do that with your particular genre. So that'll be an interesting conversation. So we are going to come back, and we will see you again, hear you again.
Thank you.
If you'd like to learn a little bit more about Janoris and the work she does, go to her website, Janoris.com. There you can find educational programs, events, and her podcast. F is for female, and I will leave information where you can find her on socials and her website address.
If you enjoyed this podcast, The Creative Warriors, the female heart and soul of photography, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep the conversation going. Stay curious and have a happy artistic journey. Thank you for listening to the Creative Warriors podcast, the female heart and soul of photography. See you next episode.